UAP, Unidentified Anomalous Phenomenon. Are they extraterrestrial, interdimensional, or are they simply a result of top-secret military projects? Join the discussion now on UAP Crossfire, where conspiracies collide.
I love that music. Welcome to UAP Crossfire, the show that asks the biggest question in the universe. I think they're even asking in Washington right now. Are we alone? This show is designed not to just bring you information, but question that information, challenge it, disagree with it, pick it apart. Because ufology, there are believable stories, and there's some that are just way far out there. We're going to bring you both on this show. And, you, the viewer, you decide what's real and not real. And it's up to you, because, hey, listen, if people say they're experts, I think you better run, because I don't think there's an expert in this field. Maybe somebody in the government that's keeping their mouth shut. But all we're getting is a bunch of crumbs. They spoon fed, just like they did today. They spoon feed us a little bit of information and say, hey, we're being visited, but nobody says, this is where the bodies are. This is where the crash is. So I'm just waiting for, the knockout punch. It hasn't come yet. So here we are. Grab any information that we can. What the hell's going on with extraterrestrials, interdimensional, demons, creatures living in the ocean, underground bases? And the big one, are we at war in the universe? I've heard that story too. Abductions, hibernation projects, the military-industrial complex, reverse engineering, dead scientists. Whoa, that's a big one. Dead scientists and mayhem. And all of this much more. Where do we start? Well, it does end somewhere, but we're going to start it off and talk about all these different things on this show from week to week. Also, I want to bring on my co-host, but just before I do that, I want to say a few words about the beloved Dave McDonald. Amanda, would you put up that picture? There he is. Dave was a true gentleman. Always came and said hello with a hearty handshake. Great leader of MUFON. I had the privilege of being one of his state directors for New York at the time, serving under him. I can't tell you how many times we had talks, and he was just a gentleman. Absolutely, never wavered from that. Our condolences from this entire crew to the family and Dave. Wherever you are, may you rest in peace. And, you did your job like a champ. All right, let me bring on my co-host, Dan Carlson, who we affectionately call the Padre. So if you hear me calling him the Padre during the show, that's my man, Dan. Hi, Dan. What's up?
Hi, Chris. Here we are in our new format, exploring the unknown together, and who knows what we're going to dig up.
Yeah, we're going to have all kinds of stuff. I mean, Commander Cobra will be on the show from time to time because he is working so hard doing the things that he does that he can't tell us about. But he says, hey, Chris, I'm going to be watching this show, and I wish you the best. I wish you all the crew here the best, and he's the best. So, Commander, can't wait till you come back on the show, and we'll have some great fun with that. And you know what? Also, our friend Bob Spearing. Bob Spearing is going to be doing a short clip every week on our show just to tell us what's the latest stuff from MUFON. What are these big cases that MUFON are actually working on? So, Amanda, without further ado, let's play clip 1 of UAP Fastcast.
Hi everybody, my name is Bob Spearing. I am the Mutual UFO Network's Director of International Development. Thank you for joining me today on our inaugural episode of UAP Fastcast. Today I'd like to talk about the Lake Huron shootdown of the mysterious object in February of 2023. If you recall, on February 3rd, 2023, a Chinese spy balloon was shot down off the coast of the Carolinas in the Atlantic after traversing the entire North American continent. It stopped over certain military bases. It was a very sophisticated surveillance balloon. So at this point, the United States, I guess, got a little antsy And NORAD tweaked their sensors, and they started seeing things all over the North American skies that they hadn't seen before. Immediately, they sent out 3 fighter jets the following week. One took down an object near Barrow, Alaska on the tundra. One took down an object in the Yukon forests of Canada. And one fighter jet in particular took out an octagon-shaped object with some sort of appendage hanging down from it. And Anna Luna, the representative from Florida, requested 46 videos from the War Department last month. And in the latest tranche of releases that President Trump has authorized, there are 62 videos and files, including the purported shoot down of the octagon or hexagon shaped object over Lake Huron. Let's look at the short 20-second FLIR camera from the fighter jet, and let's see what they actually blew up. Now, there's a couple of things about this video that I want to go into. Near the very end, you actually see it looks like the tracker is trying to track onto a second object that may have ejected from the initial object that was shot down, or it's something else that has come into the picture. But what's interesting about the video is the way that it looks before it's destroyed. It almost looks like not an octagon or a hexagon, but almost like a spermazoa with a tail coming down from it and a dark central object. So the prevailing theory is, A, because we have never seen or heard anything else ever about this shoot down until this week, was it something shot down that was so dangerous that they couldn't tell the public? Was it something compromising, perhaps Russian or Chinese technology, and they simply can't tell us? Or is it so embarrassing that they can't admit that they shot down a hobby balloon? So here's where the story gets really interesting. They claimed after a week back in February that they were never going to be able to find any of these 3 objects that they shot down. On the tundra, even under snow, maybe under some water, the United States could find a dime in a desert, so I never bought that story. The second story is the Yukon shoot down. They claimed they never found that either in the forests of Canada. Yet later that summer, a plane went down with several children in the Amazon, and the I believe it was the Colombian or the Venezuelan military found that plane within 3 days. And then when the Titan submersible went down on its way to the Titanic, the search field for that was the size of Connecticut, and they found that implosion in 3 days at 12,000 feet in depth. The problem with the Lake Huron shoot down is that we've never seen anything recovered. The way it shreds when it's hit by the missile suggests that maybe there was nothing internal inside it, that it could have been a balloon because it shreds. But even still, you would have debris on the surface of the lake. Lake Huron at that point in the upper Michigan Peninsula is only 152 feet deep. Another interesting bunch of stories came out after that where they were finding shipwrecks 100 years old in Lake Huron. That tells me that they were actually looking for other things and came upon those shipwrecks accidentally. So what can we take away from the video? Let's look at it one more time, and then I'll give you my final analysis on what we're seeing here. So the problem with all of these videos that are being released, whether it's the ones we're seeing in Congress, whether it's the ones that Jeremy Corbell teases us with, like the Iraqi jellyfish over the military base several years ago, we never get the metadata. So that video that I just showed you, it could have been from Lake Huron from February 2023, but the files that they're putting out give no explanation as to what we're seeing. There's not even metadata where I can confirm if that's actually Lake Huron in February of 2023. And that's the thing you have to understand about all of these file releases. You're really not getting your money's worth, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, that's it for this edition of UAP Fastcast. My name is Bob Spearing. I encourage anybody who has a UFO sighting or believes they've been abducted to write to www.mufon.com, click on the red Report a UFO button, and let us know. We have 145,000 cases in our database, and we investigate every single one of them. You may also consider joining us on our journey. Memberships start for as little as $6 per month. Our annual convention is in Cincinnati, August 27th through the 30th this year. Again, I'm Bob Spearing. Thank you for having me, and I'll see you on the next edition of UAP Fastcast.
Wow.
Okay. Wow is right. So, Padre, let me. So we got satellites that can see a license plate from outer space. We have stuff that can see all kinds of things, but we can't find a balloon and on a frozen tundra and can't find it in a lake. But we found all these ships. What's your thought of this?
I have spent some time on the Alaska tundra, north of the Brooks Range, south of Point Barrow up there. And what people don't realize is even though it looks on the surface like a prairie, if you will, and this took place during the winter months, okay, so you're talking about the sun never coming up, and you have that disadvantage. And what the tundra is it's like a giant pudding with a bunch of pretty plants on top of it, various lichens and so forth. And when you walk on that, you sink immediately. If you're trying to hunt as I was, every step you're sinking down up above your boots and having to pull your boot out. I say this to say that if something is hot in the wintertime and it falls into that tundra, okay, initially it's going to melt the snow and the ice, and then it's going to thaw out what it's immediately beneath it. And you could easily lose it in the muck unless you're able to pinpoint exactly where it hit. Then you have the challenge too of how big is the debris. And looking at what Bob showed, my layman's viewpoint of the thing is it looks like one of those Mylar balloons, and the fact that it popped into almost uniform sized little bits. There's not going to be anything as far as debris to find. It's all going to melt, and what's left is going to fall and blow who knows how many miles away, because it was up there 4 miles in the atmosphere.
All right, but how would a balloon be hot? How would it melt?
From the missile that exploded. When the missile exploded and set it on or blew it up, that fire, that plastic is very flammable, and it's gonna, like when you burn a plastic bag or something.
So you explained the tundra. Now explain to me Lake Huron. You can find ships, but you can't find anything of remnants of something being shot down.
Let's say that it is one of those larger Mylar balloons, maybe 20 inches across, and it's got the little ribbon streaming down, which it looked like that to me. Mm-hmm. Okay, now it is reflecting sunlight up there. It's at 20,000 feet. I don't know how much it's going to retain as far as heat, but that missile is going to hit or detonate the hottest thing in the vicinity of its path. So they have a lock on it with a AIM-9 Sidewinder. That missile strikes the target, or some of them are programmed to blow up right next to it, for a maximum shrapnel dispersal, and boom. And of course, you got a ball of flame, and you saw the little bits flying in every direction. And of course, if they're on fire, they're going to instantly melt and become nothing. There's not going to be much left of a Mylar balloon. And then it's going to fly. What is left is going to drop through the various levels of the atmosphere. And what people don't often remember is that the wind can be blowing at different directions at different altitudes of the atmosphere. Here's my days as a meteorologist coming forward. So the wind up there at 20,000 feet could be different what it is at 10,000 feet, which could be different what it is at 5,000 feet, which could be different from what it is at the ground. And so parts are going to be scattered over a huge area. And if they're not very big, they're going to be extremely difficult to find.
All right, that makes sense. So we'll keep this one open because I'm not sure. I don't trust the government. Okay, if they say they couldn't find it, I just don't believe that they're telling us the whole truth, and that's the way it go. Well, let's get on to what we really want to talk about, because I'm pretty excited about this, because I like this guy, and I think he's pretty cool. We're going to talk about the life and times of Nikola Tesla. And the thing is, was he in communication with aliens or somebody, or was he just an extraordinary man that knew how to get things done? So we're going to examine his life. There he is, Nikola Tesla. Some people say he was in contact with aliens, or maybe he was. I don't know. If he was an extraordinary man with talent that amazed those who were brilliant, because he was so gifted at his time. But I will tell you this: there were people who wanted to destroy this man. There were people who wanted to see him go away penniless and into poverty, which he did. And J.P. Morgan was one of them. Nikola Tesla was born on July 10th of 1856. His life was one of a suburban, I don't know, whatever, an American engineer.
Serbia.
That's it. Serbian American engineer, a futurist, and an inventor. At the age of 7, he had the death of his brother. And then all of a sudden, he turned into a mystic. And I didn't know that. Did you know that, Padre? That he became a mystic?
Actually, that may not be true, Chris.
Really? Tell me why.
Well, we know that, especially in his adult years, he was very much a nuts and bolts. He was not a religious man. He wasn't even really a spiritual man. He did, as a youth, begin reading some Hindu writings, and then he later, shortly before his death, again was reading some of the Vedic texts and so forth. But he was born into the Orthodox Church, the Eastern Orthodox Church, and he had a religious family. When we use that word mystic, it conjures in my mind visions of people sitting in a lotus position and humming and so on and so forth. He was never that deep into it, but he did have an interesting belief. He believed that all of the information in the cosmos was stored somewhere in the universe by a central mind, and that if a person could tune their brain into that, like checking things out of a library, you could check out various scientific things. And I want to circle back to that thought near the end of the broadcast, if we could. But to call him a mystic, I think, is it's not completely accurate.
Well, they claim he had visions.
Oh, absolutely, he did. He did. In fact,
Wouldn't that be a little mystic?
Well, when there is a phenomenon that has been observed, and I don't know what the exact psychiatric word is for it, but he would say that he would have these flashes of light in his mind. Some people say, well, that's affiliated with migraines, but I haven't seen any record of him having migraines. So he'd have these flashes of light, and then he would have this vision in his head of what his invention was going to look like even before he put anything down on paper. And that was what was unique, is that he would actually assemble the various components in his head. And he wasn't one for making a bunch of prototypes and trying them out. He prided himself on creating the thing and having it work the first time. That is certainly a next level genius. And, these flashes of light are certainly interesting, but they weren't something that he necessarily was able to control or could summon. He valued isolation and said that all of his ideas came when he was alone, and he would sometimes take a walk. He would observe nature, and then flash, this idea would come in. But as far as, chanting, summoning, things of that nature, we don't have any record of him doing that.
No, I didn't see
Right.
anything about that, but I will tell you that when you said that there was a storage of higher intelligence, he always claimed that he was in communication with that intelligence.
Yes. Yeah, he believed that is where his inspiration came from. Again, when you say communication, there's an implication there of two-way, like prayer, for instance. You're praying to God and an answer comes and so forth. In his situation, he regarded his brain as a receiving unit. He didn't request anything. It's just all of a sudden there'd be this flash, and then this invention would appear in his head.
He was fascinated by thunderstorms and lightning storms.
Oh yeah, aren't we all?
And one of the things, as he was working on thunder and lightning storms, he picked up a series of beeps. I don't know if you knew this, but he picked up a series of beeps. And after ruling out, solar and terrestrial types of signals, he thought it came from another planet. He thought that he actually was able to get a communication from another planet. And people kind of laughed at him. But in 1996, scientists did publish, Tesla's experiment and showed that, in fact, there was a signal coming, but it was by a moon passing through Jupiter's magnetic field, as opposed to it being, an extraterrestrial type of person signaling him. But just shows you the brilliant man.
Yeah, or was it? Are we not still interested in the moons of Jupiter and potential life on them? And if we're listening to Radio Titan, who knows what might be transmitted there? But no, you're right. In fact, he had actually, I guess, brought some people together to hear this message from extraterrestrial beings, but it turned out just to be, at least we're told from 1996, a natural radio burst, as is sometimes an occurrence within the cosmos.
One of the things he was famous for, he made alternating current, AC. He was actually in competition with Edison. Edison was working on direct current. Tesla was working on alternating current. Tesla showed that alternating current can keep its power going through the lines, and he actually won the project for where I closely live, Niagara Falls, the hydroelectric power dam that's there. That's Tesla's creation. By what
it's still putting out power today, isn't it?
It is. I guess when Tesla makes something, he makes something. Yeah. And it's just amazing that Elon Musk is using the name of Tesla. I think that's really cool that he would do that. But he made all kinds of things, and I don't want to make the whole show on his inventions. I want to talk about different things about him. But one of the things, Amanda, no, not the next one. Yeah, talk about that. He did all kinds of things. One of the things that he worked on, he didn't realize that he had actually discovered it, was X-rays. Tesla did a photo negative. He took a photo with Mark Twain. Mark Twain was invited down to his lab, took a photo with Mark Twain, and when he observed it, he thought the photograph came out, was ruined and spotchy. He didn't realize that the Crookes tube that he was using had developed an X-ray, and that just weeks later, a German scientist by the name of Wilhelm Roentgen announced the discovery of X radiation. So actually, Tesla was the first one to discover it. He just didn't know that he had it, and
Uh,
it just goes on. In
It
the
isn't, yeah, isn't that just something we have another thing we have to thank him for? He was the inspiration to Roentgen in Germany, and uh, Tesla's legacy is one of inspiring, brilliant minds that came after him and still does so today.
Now this is going to blow your mind, and I didn't know this, but Tesla built the first drone. It was a ocean drone, but he actually in 1898. That's it. Yes, thanks, Amanda. Tesla built a wireless control boat, one of the first wireless control things, and you could basically say it was a drone, a boat drone. He was able to navigate it thoroughly by wireless remote control. And
Mhm.
now, we're everything in the sky now is about drones. But we had this technology. He had this technology back in 1898. What do you think of that?
I think that it is ironic that here we are, we're recording this on Tuesday, and in the news headlines today is the story of one of our helicopters shot down over the Straits of Hormuz, and the two crewmen were rescued by a remotely piloted drone boat. And who made the first one? The subject of our program this evening is Nikola Tesla. And we are continuing to use his inventions in some form or another to the benefit of mankind.
Yeah, it's just absolutely crazy what Tesla's done. And a lot of people don't talk about his inventions. The biggest topic, well, was Tesla an alien? Was Tesla getting information from the aliens? I don't think Tesla was an alien. I'm sorry. I can't buy that. I think he was just an ordinary man. And like you said, and this is an amazing thing that what you said. Is there a storage area where intelligence is gathered? And do people feed off of that? Because if we look at some of the most amazing people in our world, and let's talk even about Elon Musk or Nikola Tesla or Edison or Einstein or all these people, were they able to tap into this central type of intelligence that gives them this type of inventions or gives them the ideas to create this?
Well, Chris, I have an angle on that from the spiritual side.
Oh, please tell
And
us.
yes, yeah, I think that, in fact, I'm doing a series of sermons to my congregation about the spiritual world and the entities that are involved there. According to the Book of Enoch, which is not scripture, but it is still considered to be a record of what was believed at the time of Christ by the Jewish community. There was a race of beings called the Watchers. These were angelic or heavenly beings who came down to earth and they interacted with humans. And when part of that interaction was the giving of humans certain technologies that they had not had prior to that time. One taught them how to make weapons. One taught them how to make cosmetics. One taught them how to read the stars and birthed astrology. One taught them how to mix certain herbs and assemble roots together. And the root word for what he did is in the ancient language is pharmakia, from whence we get pharmacy in our language. And so you had spiritual beings communicating to mortal beings key technologies. And I believe that this has been going on ever since that time and continues up through this day. We can see, especially in the last 200 years, how rapidly we've seen technology increase. And in my worldview, in my Christian and biblical worldview, certain portals to the occult were opened in the late 1800s. They were tapped into by certain nations and science communities, including Nazi Germany. And these spiritual entities were communicating into the minds of people just that missing piece of information, that way to explain how to do something, and it resulted in the next great leaps of technology. I know that we're up against a break here, Chris.
We are.
So we can go ahead and take us into that, and we'll be
Amanda,
back.
take us to the break.
Over 240 million calls are made annually to 911. Fire, EMS, and police are then met with the same problem. The address of the residence or location is not sufficiently marked for responders to find it quickly during an emergency. That delay can mean the difference between life or death to you or your loved ones. When activated, the Locator 911 bulb converts to a strobing, color-changing beacon, identifying the exact location. Go to fast911help.com now to purchase your bulb today. fast911help.com.
Okay, we are back at UAP Crossfire, and we've been talking about Nikola Tesla, the man, the legend. And I'll tell you, the next thing we want to get on is his greatest invention, but it destroyed him. Now, everybody's heard about 0-point energy. Energy that is free, energy that comes from the air, energy that is all around us, and tap into it. Well, Tesla made what they call the Tesla coil. Some people say this is part of an energy, alien energy invention. It was given to the human race, and we just kind of tucked it away and never let it out. And this was back done in the 1890s. It's his most important invention, this Tesla coil. He did an amazing job with this. And I'm just going to go in, and then we're going to discuss this. This device is used as electric voltage and frequency of electricity, laying the foundation for the idea of wireless energy transmission and serving as the basis for other inventions that would appear. Tesla was actually being funded by J.P. Morgan, and J.P. Morgan believed that this was going to be a wireless communication system, but Tesla didn't care about that. He wanted to give civilization free energy. And well, you know what, Amanda? Let's play clip 2, wireless electric.
In simple terms, he believed the planet itself could carry electricity the same way a wire does. This idea might sound totally strange today, but Tesla was not just making it up. He based it on real experiments and observations.
Tesla went out to Colorado Springs to see if he could send electricity miles, which is a tremendous achievement. But he had a huge tower, and there was 200 feet to the top.
The assistant, who was a young female engineer, worked closely with him throughout the Wardenclyffe project. According to her later writings and interviews, she claimed they once ran a test where light bulbs were placed miles away from the tower. When they turned the system on, the bulbs lit up without being connected to any wires. This was shocking because back then electricity needed wires. The idea of powering something from far away without a cable sounded like pure magic.
Pure magic or genius?
Oh, you're asking me?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You're the co-host, so I got
yeah. He tapped into something there. Now, these claims are disputed. He clearly had that vision of transmitting electricity over great distances, and he had tremendous light shows with arcing electricity going from one place to the other. But the challenge of just pulling that much power out of the air, he either had tapped into something that was centuries beyond what we could comprehend, or he was manipulating something for funding. And, I hate to accuse the dead of something, but, we have to allow for that possibility. He struggled with funding problems his entire life, and he needed to have that big thing to happen. And there's a thing that, back when I was working in television newsrooms, there was this thing we used to remind each other that perception is reality, that sometimes the truth gets put to one side because people perceive something to be different, and because they perceive that, they're not willing to accept the truth of the matter, and they prefer perception over reality. And if he could persuade through perception, through visual perception, that he was onto something, then some of these big money barons would invest in him, and many did up to that point. But then, as you observe, Chris, if we have free energy going out to the world, I mean, a lot of these really wealthy guys, then the oil industry was just beginning to take off. Our fossil fuel industries, our coal was absolutely huge in those days. And, you get a bunch of rich and powerful guys who perceive a threat. Well, they had a way of choking him off, and that's what they did.
They did. J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan gave him thousands and back then, thousands and thousands of dollars. It was like being a billionaire. And J.P. Morgan funded this whole thing, gave him an entire staff. He had a staff of people, and he was able to build a tower. Yeah, because J.P. Morgan was saying, hey, I'm going to be a guy with wireless communication. I'm going to be able to dominate all of communication. That was J.P. Morgan's idea. Tesla had a different idea. He says, never mind that communication stuff. I think everybody should have free energy. Build this tower for me, and I'll tell you whatever you want to hear, but it ain't going to be that. Here's the brilliant part about this. Okay. The brilliant part is, not only did he draw the energy from the air, he dug into the earth, put metal rods down there that would connect with that, and he used the actual earth as a transmitter to go from one Tesla tower to another. It would go from coil to coil wherever they were put up. And so that one base of energy could be spread all over the world as long as you had a Tesla coil.
So let's look at some of the science behind this, and I'll try to keep it as generic as possible.
Yeah, please do. I mean, I'm no
okay. Yeah. So he was fascinated by thunderstorms, as you mentioned earlier. And thunderstorms, of course, produce lightning. How does that happen? What's going on there that allows us to see that manifestation of electricity? So as the cloud moves over the surface of the earth, there are particles of electrical charge that build up inside the thundercloud. And we're still researching as to how that happens. It may have to do with the way that ice and water are involved in forming and deforming within the thundercloud. But anyway, you get that there's a certain charge in the ground that's always there. And then you have this moving over the top. And when there's enough charge built up in the cloud, it has to find a way to discharge that. And so what happens is an invisible leader, as it's called, comes up from the ground. We don't see that in our electromagnetic spectrum of vision. And then the cloud completes that link, and then there's a flash of lightning. And, we've all seen some really impressive displays of that. So, and by the way, factoid here, a bolt of lightning is about 8 times as hot as the sun. So that's a lot. And the average diameter of a lightning bolt is about the diameter of a pen or a pencil. And people say, really? It's that small? How do you know? Well, we look at where lightning is hit, like through the roof of my house several years ago. And it's a tiny hole. It's a tiny hole, and it just looks big because it is so bright. So somehow Tesla was able to mimic that by taking that ball, or I don't know what he called it, at the end of a pole,
Tesla coil.
Okay, and then having enough of a charge build up inside of that so that it had to equalize with the charge of the ground or another coil, and you would get this discharge between the two as they are, trying to equalize that. We in our own lives experience this. If you walk across a carpeting in the winter when it's dry in your house wearing wool socks, and then you touch a doorknob, you have that spark, and that is nature has to have this balance, this equalization of charges, and it's equalizing the charge between you that you have built up by moving across the carpet and the doorknob, which has its standard charge just by being a doorknob. So we see that manifestation often in our own lives in static electrical charges.
Let me ask you this now.
Mhm.
Full transparency, folks out there, the Padre was a weatherman, a meteorologist at one time, correct?
Yes.
So he knows about this much more than I do. God bless him for that. Here's the thing. Suppose the sky is clear, cloudless sky. I mean, does that mean you're not going to get energy?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. I know that everything around us has some form of energy in it. It may just be latent energy that's within it that hasn't been released yet. No, a piece of wood has to have heat applied to it to create fire that releases the energy in that, and that manifestation in the form of fire is what warms us in a, whether it's gas igniting in a furnace or a fire place log in the fireplace, you have that energy. Now, quantum mechanics has been trying to work on the whole 0 point energy problem. And that what Tesla was getting at was this just getting energy from the emptiness of space. This, boy, I got to be careful here.
With it.
I don't want to lose viewers by getting too technical here. So let me just say this. I don't know about you, Chris. I think we're close to the same age, but when we were growing up, we were taught that space is a vacuum. There's nothing there. It's just empty, nothing. Well, we now know that's not true. There are all kinds of particles and dust particles and things flying around through space. And then you've got this, whatever we know is dark energy. And this may play a role in this, but we've discovered through quantum physics that even within space itself, there is a stasis, a 0 point of energy that's just sitting there. And we're trying to figure out now, how can we tap into that? And just here this last, I want to get the name right here. I had it up on my computer here, but there's something called the Casimir effect, okay? And there is a company named Casimir that just recently had a breakthrough in tapping into some of this unseen energy, or so they claim. They're still waiting for peer review, but they were able to get at the nano level, so we're teeny stuff, to tap into energy between two objects in order to contribute power to a computer chip. So the idea, I mean, this is to, let's say, 0 point what the Wright brothers flight was to aviation. Everybody's like, man has flown. What, he flew what, about 100 feet?
That's about it. Yeah, wasn't anything you could take pictures of it, really.
It proved the concept.
Yeah.
And what they may have done here with this company is proved this concept. The amount of power generated is minuscule, but then now let's look at how can we scale that. And if we can scale it up, then we could come to a point where it is, feasibly something to tap into. Long way to go, has to be peer reviewed, but if true, that moment and this creation by this Casimir company could be looked at as history's Wright brothers moment in the area of tapping into 0 point energy, or the ambient energy that is around us.
Actually, Padre, it was more than just a little energy that he did. Amanda, let's play clip 4A, the test.
One night in the spring of 1903, something extraordinary happened at Wardenclyffe Tower. It was long past midnight. The air outside was still and cool, and the nearby town slept in silence. Inside the tower, however, Nikola Tesla and his assistant were wide awake. They were alone, without any reporters or investors watching, and there were no official records made of what was about to happen. Tesla had decided that this would be the night he tested the tower at full capacity for the first time. He did not want anyone to interfere or impose restrictions. He wanted to see exactly what the system could do when it was given complete freedom to perform. According to the assistant's account, which she recorded many years later, Tesla began by checking the underground grounding system that connected the tower to the Earth. This section had always been kept secret, even from most of his team. Beneath Wardenclyffe, a network of iron pipes extended deep into the ground, connecting to the water table below. Tesla believed this allowed the tower to grip the planet electrically. When the tower's coils were activated, energy from the oscillators would surge downward through these pipes while the dome above projected a matching electrical field upward into the air. Together, the ground and the atmosphere would act like two sides of a giant natural circuit.
Transmitted wirelessly by using the Earth's natural conductivity.
The goal was to make the Earth itself carry the electrical current, allowing it to reappear anywhere else in the world where a receiver was tuned to the same frequency.
Now, that's amazing. And during the test, he actually put light bulbs into the ground, and they lit up. They have that. That's been proven and recorded. And actually, there's been tests that people have done with like miniature Tesla coils that they've been able to do wireless energies and stuff. So to me, I think the government's got this. This is one of the things, you call it a conspiracy theory, but I truly believe Tesla invented wireless energy. Government scooped it up. It's been leaked out. They call it 0-point energy, where it's free energy. But you're right, Padre. If in fact we let this out, the oil markets will go crazy. Like you said, the coal markets, and you wouldn't need nuclear power plants. You wouldn't need, ships with carrying oil and all this other war stuff that's going on, because everybody would have free energy. The only thing that you would have is somebody building the coils all over the world. And once you had that and had it designed, it would beat New York State's electric bill. I can tell you that.
Well, one of the things that happened when he died, tragically alone, and my understanding is penniless, in January of 1943, is that the government seized his books, his writings, whatever he had there with him. Now, the government agency that conducted the raid was known as the OAPC, and they were a branch of the Department of Justice. And what they did is remember, we're in World War II, and that Tesla is a Serbian, okay? And you may remember that's the part of the world where World War I started, and it's currently under, at the time in 1943, it was under Nazi control. And so this group that was in charge of handling the enemy aliens during wartime duties, even though he was a naturalized U.S. citizen since 1891, they had concerns, and he had talked and written about being able to turn this energy into a death ray or particle beam weapon.
Right.
And it concerned that because he still had relatives in that part of the world, he might be colluding with them in some way, whether knowing or unknowingly, he could be aiding and abetting the Nazis. Now, what's interesting is that an electrical engineer named Dr. John G. Trump, who is the uncle of our president, he was at MIT and he examined the papers for the National Defense Research Committee, and he concluded that there was no immediately practical way to turn what he had into a weapon. It wasn't until 1952, after an extensive legal battle, that a U.S. court recognized his nephew, Sava Kazanovic, as the rightful heir, and his remaining papers and possessions were shipped then to Belgrade. Of course, Belgrade part of the communist bloc behind the Iron Curtain at
So
that
they,
time.
they didn't get everything.
Well, we would hope that they wouldn't. But now I guess that there's the Nikola Tesla Museum that
Yep.
is in Belgrade with over 160,000 items that are related to Tesla and his research. The FBI maintained its own investigative files on Tesla, but these were declassified and released in stages under the Freedom of Information Act, with major batches coming out fairly recently in 2016 and 2018. And you can actually go to the FBI website if you want to, and you can download them and see what Tesla was working on.
Well, there's a couple of things that you said that piqued my interest. One of the things he actually did go to the U.S. government first and said, I have a death ray. As you said, I can turn this into a direct energy weapon, what we call nowadays. But he claimed that he could take planes out of the sky at one time, that whoever had this weapon would control the world. Simply because he was penniless at the time. He was going from hotel to hotel, not paying the bill, and just finally, tried to do it. Matter of fact, one of the things he did, he actually gave the box to the hotel manager. He says, in this is a death ray. He goes, and I'm going to give it to you, for my payment. He says, put it in the box. Because if you open the box, I can't tell you what's going to happen. They actually took the box, wrote off his bill, put it in some closet where it sat there. When they opened it up, there was nothing there but garbage. And so he was a little bit of a con artist, but allegedly he did approach the Russians. There's always been that alleged that he said, listen, the United States is going to do it. And one of the things that he tried to do, he was neck and neck race with the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project being looked at that time, and also they were looking at Tesla's thing, and he didn't win. They wanted to go ahead with the Manhattan Project, and so he couldn't sell. And then what he did after that was he went to different countries, and I think that's why the FBI said, hey, this stuff we can't let out. And as you said, there was a organization that came in and just confiscated everything. And the amazing part is that our president right now, his uncle, who was a professor at MIT, was asked to come in and say, hey, I want you to take a look at all this stuff. But, the FBI and the government weren't the only ones that were interested in Tesla. And this is where it gets a little spooky, because some people say that aliens were giving this information or watching him or guiding him. But his assistant talked about, as the test was going on, there were people at the edge of a wood line that were in some kind of uniform, but she didn't think they were military uniforms, but they were watching this, motionless, standing there. And I'm just wondering, could have been aliens watching this? I don't know. Man, play clip 5A.
He spoke softly, as if to himself, saying, "It works." The assistant said she could hear fear in his voice, not triumph. She later explained that Tesla seemed to understand that what he had just witnessed might be far more powerful than he expected. For several minutes after the shutdown, they both listened to the faint crackle of static still echoing around the dome. The assistant tried to ask questions, but Tesla did not respond. He was writing notes rapidly on a small pad, recording measurements that no one ever saw again. He told her that the results were beyond expectation and that they would have to test again soon, but only under stricter control. He warned her not to speak of the event to anyone, not even the workers who maintained the grounds. He feared that word of the success might reach the wrong ears. They thought the night was over. The air outside was calm again and the machinery had cooled. But as Tesla and his assistant began locking up the control room, she noticed something unsettling. Beyond the fence line at the edge of the trees, she could see silhouettes. Men standing still, quietly watching the tower. They did not move. They did not speak. But even in the dim light, she could see that they were not ordinary townspeople. Someone else had been there all along, witnessing what Tesla had tried so hard to keep hidden. The observers who shouldn't have been there. After the strange test at Wardenclyffe Tower ended and everything went quiet again, the assistant noticed something that made her uneasy. As she stood near the base of the tower trying to process what had just happened, she glanced toward the tree line that bordered the property.
Edison's direct current power plants dominated the nation's power needs.
It was dark, but her eyes adjusted enough to see several men standing just beyond the fence. They were grouped together, silent, and very still. What stood out immediately was their appearance. They were wearing dark uniforms, but there were no visible badges, logos, or any other symbols to show who they were or where they were from. They definitely were not local townspeople. They weren't reporters or curious neighbors. And they didn't look like any of J.P. Morgan's usual staff or business inspectors. The assistant had seen those men before. These were different. These men weren't wandering by accident. They were clearly there for a reason, and they were watching closely. They didn't say anything. They didn't move forward, but they also didn't try to hide. That silence, combined with their presence, gave her a bad feeling.
Now, the village in New York where this was taking place is a small village where everybody knows everybody. It wasn't like a major city and stuff. Mm-hmm. So what do you think, Padre? Aliens or just military people or what?
Well, we know, and again, from my worldview, the Bible speaks of a special race of angelic beings called the Watchers. And their task is to monitor humanity and to keep an eye on what's going on planet Earth. I think that it's not beyond the realm of possibility that these beings were watchers and that their presence really increased during the 1800s. They had a lot to do during the First World War and again in the Second World War, the Foo Fighters, for example. And then once the atomic bomb went off, we've just had this constant interaction with otherworldly unseen beings. You wish to call them aliens, I guess that's acceptable, or some people say angels and demons, maybe a partial answer, but not entirely. But I think that when we see what people are coming to a conclusion, it is more toward an interdimensional or say a spiritual dimension that we're interacting with than interplanetary in nature. And so I think that these were watchers.
Well, it could be. That's something you got to think about. Look, we don't know who they were. We don't know a lot about this ufology field or supernatural field or stuff. And like you say, and I have to agree with you, there's a book that was written that kind of guides you. That's called the Bible. Okay. And you're more spiritual than I am. I know where I'm going. I'm going to purgatory if I'm lucky. You know, my year.
We can work on that.
Well, yeah, you're going to need a lot of work. But anyways, Nikola Tesla was a brilliant man. He had extraordinary things about him that was able to make such unbelievable inventions. The biggest problem is in our society today, just like what we have, is when we find something that won't make money or will hurt our income or economy, we tend to destroy it or hide it or buy it and lock it up. Because it's not about helping humanity. It's about how much money I can make off of this. So any final word before we wrap this show?
Yeah, I'll just add this. You mentioned, if it conflicts with power, if it conflicts with money, and I will say that if it conflicts with a narrative, for instance, in archaeology, there is a certain narrative. The Egyptians built the pyramids, the Incas built these megaliths in South America, and now we're beginning to find all kinds of evidence that contradicts those narratives, and the people who have those narratives and make millions off tourists every year off those narratives, they're shutting down any evidence that comes forward. And what I'd like to do is tease our next episode, Chris.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. So what do we got on the plate for next week?
We're going to look at giants. Where do they come from? Why is it that so many cultures around the world talk about giants? And are giants still walking amongst us today?
And do they
talk
eat
about
us?
that. Yeah, talk about that next week.
All right. Well, listen, folks, that's our show, UAP Crossfire. This is where we get into discussions on what's true, what's not true, and what's out there. Amanda, do we have our UAP email address? If you can put that up, if you can find it.
Please.
There you go. Hey, if you got a question for this show, email us and we will take your question, put it on the podcast, and try to answer it the best we can, or try to get you an answer, because it's all about sharing information. There's been too much of information being withheld, stored, or whatever. And listen, do me a favor. When you come to the UAP YouTube page and everything, hit that subscribe button. You got it, because it helps us out. All right. Well, listen, Amanda, get us out of here.